So the other day I was trying to load the funnel envy library into an existing application, and the funnel envy library requires a script tag to be loaded and then some additional configuration to be done on the successful load of said script tag. And because I happen to be working in a jQuery context, I thought to myself, oh, no problem, I'll just use jQuery to load the script tag and respond to the load event. And I used an approach that looked like this, where I create the script tag, I bind the load event handler here, and you can see I'm just logging that it's done, and then I'm configuring the script and I'm appending it to the body. And what I was finding is that the script itself was being loaded and injected into the active document, but my onload event was never firing. And I kept trying to play with using attributes versus props, how I was doing the load. Was I doing onload? Was I doing dot load? Was I don't know. I tried a bunch of things. I lost like an embarrassing amount of time, maybe an hour and a half, until I finally just gave up and I dropped down into the native DOM API and I used that and everything was fine. But I didn't want to just leave it like that. I wanted to understand why this wasn't working. So this morning I dug into the jQuery source code and I discovered that the various append methods, like append to, append, prepend to, anything that essentially does some DOM manipulation under the hood, will actually look for and intercept script tags. And it will actually move the control flow of that script tag out of the DOM manipulation and into an AJAX control flow. So it'll attempt to load the script using AJAX, and because it does that, it simply bypasses any load handlers. And if you're using the slim build of jQuery, which omits the AJAX and effects modules, this whole thing just completely fails silently. It just doesn't work at all. And if we look at the jQuery source code, and we look at, here's the DOM manipulation method, scroll down here, and I had to find this using a debugger statement. I just stepped through the entire source code of my demo. And what we see down here is eventually there's this has scripts block, which looks at the collection of DOM elements that's about to be injected, and if it has a script, what it actually does is it defers to this eval URL. But it only does that if the eval URL is present because of the AJAX dependency. And if we just jump down to this, what we can see is that this is then referring to the AJAX method. So essentially, if we go to inject script tags, it gets pulled out of the normal DOM manipulation process and routed through an AJAX control flow, but only if that AJAX control flow exists. So to see this in action, I've set up a demo here where I use various attempts to load a script tag into the page and listen for the onload. Here I'm using just completely vanilla DOM API, creating the element, binding an onload event handler, appending the child. In the next one, I'm using the add event listener as opposed to the onload property, just to see if there was a difference there. Here, this is the one we were just looking at. It's completely jQuery, entirely jQuery construction and injection. Test 4 is normal DOM API to create and bind the onload handlers, but then jQuery here doing nothing but the final append. And this is where we really see that the append is what is messing up or what's breaking the connection between the onload events and the actual script tag element. And then finally here, I'm using jQuery to construct and configure the script tag, but then I'm dropping down to the native DOM API to actually append the configured element. And if we jump over into the browser and we run this, we can see that only 3 of the 5 scripts actually get loaded, because if we jump over to the top here, what you can see is that I'm using the slim build, which means that there is no AJAX module, and because there's no AJAX module, that sort of bait and switch of the script tag loading completely fails silently. And you can see in the console here we have no errors, right? It's just not working. If I go in and I take out the slim so that we're actually using the normal build that has AJAX, and we run that, you can see now all 5 scripts do load successfully. But if we look in the console and we look for, let me do successful here. You can see that only 1, 2, and 5 tests actually report a load event. 3 and 4 do not report a load event, and if we look at what 3 and 4 are in the code here, we can see that 3 is the completely jQuery solution, and 4 is the native DOM API followed by jQuery performing nothing but the append. So here we can really see that it has nothing to do with the way the script tag is configured. It's simply that final append method that's intercepting that script tag, rerouting it through the AJAX, and therefore bypassing any chance for the onload event handlers to fire. Of course, you could have always used something like the AJAX setup to set up some sort of global configuration for success handlers, or you could use something like the get script method. I haven't looked at the jQuery documentation in a really long time, so I'm not familiar with the get script method off the top of my head. I don't know how it works with cores or whether or not I was dealing with a library that was cores enabled. But what I can say is that the append documentation, for example, doesn't indicate that it intercepts script tags. So it would be nice if this was something that was just slightly more documented. But anyway, I'm glad that I was able to dig into it and understand why it was failing. I found my workaround, of course, but finding a workaround is not as satisfying as understanding why the original attempt failed. So now I understand, and that makes me much more of a happy camper.